Welcome out, everybody, to this episode of the TVCRE podcast. My name's Taylor Tibbetts, here with my co-host, DREY Campbell, as well as our guest, our first ever remote podcast guest, Randy Rhoads, who's with Cushing Terrell. He's their executive director of affordable housing. And we're really excited, Randy, to have you on the show. Thanks for making time.
Thrilled to be here with you guys. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we're excited to hear from you today. I had a great chance to meet you at the ULI spring meeting a few months ago, and enjoyed hearing some of the stories that you've had, and really felt like, given your experience, that you'd be able to offer some unique insights to some housing affordability issues that we're experiencing here in the Treasure Valley. If you're up for it, would you mind just giving us a little kind of background, how you got into the role you're in, where you're from, and kind of what you do day to day?
Sure. So I've been working in affordable housing since mid '90s, and my very first project was something that ended up being a example of how to do mixed income on a public housing site. And that idea ended up becoming proof of concept for a HUD funding mechanism called Hope 6. And
Okay.
Hope 6, that idea was to go on public housing sites and create a mixed income neighborhood and tear down typically all the old defunct public housing, bring streets through, parks, knit a real mixed income neighborhood together. So that proof of concept happened in the early '90s, and that funding mechanism from HUD put $20 million at a time into these neighborhoods all over the country. I ended up doing 11 of those big neighborhood transformational type developments. And then that concept ended up getting kind of updated with another HUD concept called choice neighborhood. And in that case, it was $30 million that would go into neighborhoods and focus on housing, focus on the infrastructure of the neighborhood, and also focus on the residents. So big transformative opportunities to go in and take care of a blighted, difficult living situation, and actually create a real economic beachhead in communities where non-subsidized developers and builders could come along the edges of that and really start to create a beautiful community. So that's my long story backstory, but about a year ago, I started with Cushing Terrell. Cushing Terrell noticed that we had a lot of our clients all across the country that were struggling with affordable housing for their own employees, and so the leadership at Cushing Terrell decided that we should do something about it. So I was recruited and was thrilled to take on this opportunity to go around the country. We've got 13 offices around the United States, so working in those regional areas to try to bring awareness about best techniques, good thoughts, and just provide some examples, and also just provide some leadership, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding when folks start talking about it.
So what do you think some of that misunderstanding is? I would say that there's a stigma and a bias associated with affordable housing. What would you say?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I will just say that in my 30-ish years of doing this, when we're talking about a mixed income approach to creating affordable housing, there's a range of incomes that are living right next door to each other. And just like anywhere, you don't necessarily know what your next door neighbor's rent is or mortgage is. It's none of your business, really. As long as everybody's getting along, good neighbors, it shouldn't even come up, shouldn't even be an issue. So there's a kind of a middle income expectation of just lifestyle and approach, and folks getting up every day going to work, and people being good neighbors, that if everybody can agree to that, everybody can operate that way, you can have a wonderful life. And I would say that the prejudice and some of the misunderstanding, when folks start to think about affordable, they start to think that there's going to be undesirable activities or potentially behaviors that they don't want to live next to. Well, in a rental setting, that's really responsibility of the parking company to make sure that everybody is living by the house rules, essentially. And if somebody's got problematic behavior, that something's done about it immediately. Similarly, I would think that people are concerned that the properties potentially won't be maintained well. Well, I will just tell you that there's projects I've worked on in the mid-90s and early 2000s that you drive by them today, and if somebody told you they were 2 years old, 5 years old, you believe it because they're so well maintained. So it's critical that the property is managed expertly, that it's maintained expertly, but it really starts with great urban design and thinking about connectivity and thinking about how to take that site and reconnect it to the good things in the community, create a pedestrian-friendly environment, create a family-friendly environment, and have buildings that address the street that are directly connected to the public realm, so that there's eyes on the street, and so the self-policing, sort of self kind of regulating happens because this is someone's neighborhood. They care about what's happening out on the sidewalk and on the street. And you create public spaces that are safe because there's eyes on it, all the way the apartments or the buildings are organized, so that there's community services that are available for the residents that might benefit from that. Because the issue isn't just about creating something safe and creating some roof over somebody's head. That's very important. The other part of that is creating a home and creating a place where people have some consistent place to call home, and their kids can go to a school, that can get to the grocery store reasonably. There's mass transit nearby. It's walkable and it's safe. It's well lit and it's connected. So those are all issues that I think, unfortunately, there's been a lot of bad examples that have been created. But I just want to emphasize there's a lot of really great examples. There's a lot of places that before the types of developments that I'm describing happened, they were definitely places that most people would avoid because they were dangerous, and they were disconnected, and they were unhealthy. And in the course of 2 or 3 years, you could go to a place where people with lots of options would choose to live there because it's blocks from Central Business District. New development. It's got a beautiful community center. It's got a pool. It's got all these other kind of market rate sort of characteristics and qualities, finishes, square footage, and all those things. So it really does start with great design, and then it's great property management, great connectivity of the residents to community supportive services that some of them may need to be able to move up the socioeconomic ladder or health ladder. Maybe the difference in their life could be that they've got consistent daycare for their children for the first time in their life, so they can actually go focus on some education or go focus on the job. So it's not just that step of getting folks into something that's decent in terms of housing. It's helping them get connected to the services that can allow them to get a better quality of life for themselves.
That's really interesting, Randy. So, I mean, a couple of angles that we could go here. One that has kind of come top of mind is here in the Treasure Valley. Admittedly, we are experiencing house affordability issues, and I think a developer might say, like, that development sounds all well and good, but like the finances have to line up. It has to make sense. So, what type of kind of a public-private partnership have you seen that's been a successful model to accomplish what you've been talking about?
Yeah, it's really essential. The only way these type of developments can happen is that there is a public-private partnership. And so in many cases, it would either be the city or Kitchen Public Housing Authority or some other agency that already owns that ground. One of the key aspects of these large transformative developments I described is that the ground was put in. It was available. It was there. And so the developer didn't have to purchase that. Or if they did purchase it, it was $1 a year. It's long-term ground lease or something like that. So the public entity doesn't have to give up that. They still own the underlying ground, but the city or the public agency, I just think they have to have some flexibility about giving a developer an opportunity to develop the vertical work and then go out and get funding for whether that's low-income housing tax credits or help the city think about things like community development block grants to help bring streets, new utilities through. All those kind of tools are critical because with affordable housing, it's not about is there going to be a gap between resources that are available and the cost, and we just know those costs are just skyrocketing literally every single day. There's always going to be a gap. It's about the size of it. So the other partners on that public side of that private-public partnership, I would just encourage them to recognize that if they have resources like that's centrally located, that's potentially already got utilities coming to it, that maybe even has a bus line that comes by or some other kind of public transportation, those kind of things will take some of those roadblocks that developers typically see trying to start those developments. Cities can put an RFP out, request for proposal for a specific piece of ground that in the city's overall master plan makes sense for the city for affordable housing. And I will just say that the opportunity to reduce blight and create something of value that would encourage other development to happen nearby, like I was describing. These are just these are economic development tools, and the cities need to create through zoning that allows density, because another key aspect of affordable housing is there's going to have to be some density. So the chances are this is certainly 2 stories, probably 3 stories, maybe 4 to get the unit count, to get the parking to work, and all those things on any given site. So that collaborative effort between public and private is essential for this to even start, for the conversation to even start. Now, unless that private entity already has site control over a large enough piece of property and they're planning multiple phases of effort, maybe they could choose because they think it's good for the neighborhood, good for that region, for that community, that a phase or 2 phases make sense as affordable. I would suggest that we think about things like neighborhoods as opposed to individual projects. Because if we think about these type of developments as part of a neighborhood, that connectivity and that overall transformative quality, I think, will greatly be leveraged. And I think that we recognize that communities are made up of people of all kinds of income. And it's very traditional all over our country, and actually all over the world. In the same community, there's people that have the financial means to go and purchase services, and then there's people that their job is to provide those services. And so there needs to be homes, safe, resilient, sustainable homes for all those folks. So those are a couple thoughts about just what to encourage.
Yeah, and Idaho's at an interesting transition point because I would say the formulation of our communities is happening right now, right? We're going through a transition in what our community is and the demographic makeup, and it's just been a large population change in the last couple of years. We can thank a lot of that to where you're living, moving this direction. And as far as I've seen, I don't know a lot of developers that go into a development project thinking about how to create community within that development project. I don't know if we have enough density right now. We have enough open land and open areas where developers, they come in and I would say it's capital driven and it's finance driven, where there's a certain threshold that needs to be met, and it's a for-profit business. Do you think that what you're saying, kind of this idea of building community and having different players sitting at the table and a voice for each demographic or each socioeconomic status to sit happens when there's a lack of density, or when there's a lack of available space and more density?
Well, I'll just say that the places where I've worked, places like San Francisco, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. These are all, big, major metropolitan cities, and in each one of those cases, there was an old public housing site on in most of those cities where that thing was problematic. It was detriment to the city, and so the end result was now you have something that's beautiful, that's safe, that is attractive, and that a range of incomes would be interested because of the amenities and its location. And I would just say that when you're talking about, let's say, greenfield development as opposed to brownfield development, that even, and maybe even especially in greenfield development, to not consider the possibility of creating some percentage of that overall development to be affordable. And we should sort of talk about what affordable means. And federal government says if you're spending more than 33% of your income on your household cost, then it's not affordable. You're over leveraged essentially. So if we just think about 33% of people's income going towards rent, and then the rents are set based on their income tiers that they're in. Different states have different programs. But if that's the logic and the developer sees that there's benefit to all these local employers that need to have all these people with those incomes that can take advantage of some affordable program. And typically that's 60% of area median income. So whatever the area median income for community that you're looking at for development, if you looked at 30% of that income and turn that into, okay, so that's a maximum of $1,600 a month rent or something. Can I make this pencil out? That's an equation that a developer can determine. Now that might mean that the square footage of that two-bedroom apartment might be a little bit less than what they would do if they were going full market rate, or maybe not. Maybe there's a mixture and they figure out a way to make this all work. But the idea that the overall master, I would say I saw when I was in town about a month or so ago, there was big developments going, big multi-phase developments going on. So there's some kind of a master plan that's in place to allow that to happen. And through that, typically, I would say that developers going in and getting a unit development through the city. There's other kinds of entitlement steps necessary. Maybe on that back to the public-private partnership side, maybe the city can be more aggressive about requiring a certain percentage of these new developments over a certain size, maybe acreage-wise, number of units. It's going to have a residential component to it that some percentage should be affordable. And then I think what that would do would encourage developers that aren't already inclined to think about things from a neighborhood point of view to in order to access that site, in order to access those funds that come along with it, that they would think about it as a neighborhood. They would think about where's the appropriate portion of the site that the affordable will go, and where's maybe the higher end residential, and where's the retail and commercial, so that all those goods and services and easy access and pedestrian friendly kind of environment can all develop together, and you can find a decent place to put all the cars too.
When we were at the tour, we toured some multifamily developments with ULI while we were in San Diego, and a lot of them had some adjusted rents for low-income housing. And the reason that the developers said they had done it was because they were given density incentives.
Right.
And also impressed to see a way that they got more units was eliminating parking completely for any kind of vehicle. So they had no parking structures whatsoever. I know Boise has approved one project like that I know of, and I think there are potentially more on the docket to come. Do you think that kind of incentive works, and do you think that's another way to build community, to have people relying on transportation and doing those things together? Or do you think that eliminates a certain submarket of tenant by getting rid of parking?
So I think it's a great tool. I think it's in an environment where there's a number of different transportation options that are convenient and work not only for folks that are totally mobile and in good physical shape, but also works for folks that maybe have some disabilities and some kind of mobility issues. As long as all those things are in place, hey, I think that it's great. I think there's all kinds of reality to the way folks live today. It's different than the way people lived 5 or 10 or 20 years ago. And the dependency on the car, if you live in a place that's got that kind of mass transit opportunity, there's all kinds of great things about. You don't have a car, you don't have car insurance, you're not putting $5, $6 a gallon gas in it. So I think that it's smart for cities to encourage that. I will say in some parts of our country, even where there's decent mass transit, right now I'm working in Aspen where there's incredible mass transit. The issue is that a large percentage of the folks that would be living in the development that we're working on, they have to rely on a car for work, whether it's construction or some other aspect of business that they're not able to take a bus or function. So I think that zero parking potentially would limit some part of, especially the workforce type housing and others. So I think that it's as a targeted strategy that very limited parking or zero parking, it's a great idea. It just really need to be in a spot that has all that transportation rich kind of opportunity.
Yeah, that makes good sense, Randy. So segueing just a little bit, I mean, who initiates this process? Is it a developer? Is it a city? You know, if someone says, "Well, we've got an affordability issue," like, what's next? How do you get out ahead of it and really actually make something happen?
Yeah, I think that probably the quickest place is that if a developer who already has site control or owns a site, just part of what I'm trying to do is get out in front of developers all across the country and just champion the idea of mixed income approach to development. So I'm taking Cushing Terrell's taking that responsibility on and saying let's just maybe Johnny Appleseed kind of a little bit about there's some great examples, I think, that by showing developers photographs and videos of transformation before and afters, I think it could fire people's enthusiasm, their imagination, and help them understand that they've got a great opportunity to do something about this. Now, it does require a lot of political advocacy. It requires the cities and counties agree that yes, this is a crisis, and we need to act like it's a crisis, and we need to apply best practices and do things that are going to encourage, because there's development's going to happen. Development's going to happen, but if we just go with the typical market forces, chances are that development is not going to be affordable. So there has to be a kind of missionary zeal about this on the private side, and there also has to be a targeted, obvious, clear position by the city's leadership that this is critical. That this is critical to the future of our city. In Aspen, the city of Aspen started building affordable housing in the 1980s because they recognized without some subsidy, most people couldn't afford to live there. When I say most people, I'm talking about teachers, nurses, people that work for all the different city departments. It just, the city would not function. And I would say that's probably true in the majority of cities across the country. So what we have to recognize is what we have to ask the question, what kind of society and what's it going to take to have the people with the skills and the passion and the care to help create that kind of society. And we have to create housing that's affordable for that. We talk about the heroes, all of our heroes in like firemen or policemen or nurses or all these folks need places to live, and they need places that are in decent proximity to their work. They need places that are safe. They need places where they have decent schools. So cities recognizing that there's locations that could be something that it could be a high-end residential type of use on that site. That the city sites, well, we think the most important thing for our city is that we want to do everything we can to encourage mixed income, affordable rental development to happen. And so I think it's a combination of kind of missionary desire on the developer's part and programs and financial help to reduce the gap that we talked about in the beginning of this, to make it attractive and to make it to try to streamline the process. Because part of what strangles many projects is just years of entitlement kind of process. So if there's a streamlined approach, hey, you want to do affordable housing, we've got a kind of a fast track, if you can imagine that a city would put something together and say, we want to do everything we can to get as many really high quality, sustainable, safe apartment units built in the next 5 years. Because I'm sure that I'm sure there's been studies that have some number out there for the total Treasure Valley. I'm sure there's a number of 2,000, 5,000 units are needed in the next 5 years or 10 years to deal with the influx of folks coming in. So this is a known, this is quantifiable. We can see how many are needed based on the math and the science of doing that. So we can start looking at, okay, is that going to get done 10 units at a time or 20 units at a time? If we're talking about thousands of units are necessary, we need to start having developments that are building hundreds of units. So when I start talking about hundreds of units, I'm talking about a neighborhood. I'm talking about it respects the culture, respects the context, respects the climate, so that it's something that over the years remains beautiful and remains a safe and convenient and positive addition to these cities.
Yeah, you had said lobbying is an important part of it, right? Forming political relationships. And like I had said, I would say the general gist I've seen through social media and my personal networks is this negative twist upon affordable housing, and people associate it with crime stereotypes. Even local city council here in Nampa, a councilman said that they were opposed to having, I think, affordable housing in the form of townhomes because they didn't want to have crime rates go up. And it's just kind of, I would say these biases present challenges, right? Because the elected officials have biases, the general public has biases, and it seems like one of the large factors when it comes to getting this stuff approved, because you have to go through neighborhood associations, you have to go through council approval, and you have to go through city approvals. So have you found any strategies that have been effective for kind of breaking down those stereotypes?
I have. One of the most transformative experiences that I've had in a meeting is we did a presentation where we showed the full range of incomes that were living in one of these mixed income developments. And it ranged from $10,000 a year to over $100,000. And then we listed the types of occupations that all the people that lived in our development had. And when you start talking about firemen, postal workers and nurses and teachers, and you start describing some of these other incomes and salaries, people in the room are like, oh, you're talking about me. Oh, you're talking about my daughter. Oh, you're talking about my my mom. Oh, so really, affordable housing is for like 80% of our brothers and sisters, probably in most communities. And so that range of incomes, the range of income discussion and the types of jobs, it gets you away from that people thinking, oh, affordable housing is for these other people, these, you know, whatever they're worried about, having concerns about property values. But the facts are property values go up. There's statistics. I think that if people would be exposed to the fact that that the crime rates actually go down after affordable housing gets built and the neighborhood stabilizes, and you have a mixture of incomes in a place that maybe wasn't as populated, didn't have as much activity. So these are just the issues that some of the politicians you were referring to and some folks in the general public just have inaccurate information. And so that's also part of what I want to do is help folks understand that we're talking about our families. We're talking about people in each of our families, that this type of housing is necessary for them to have a happy and healthy, positive life. This isn't somebody else. This isn't them. It's us. So that's really a big part of the message, is that this what we're talking about here is creating housing to stabilize and create the workforce for our society, so that your kid can have a decent, happy, healthy, well-rested teacher showing up at their school on Monday morning, instead of driving an hour and a half through mountain passes, through terrible weather, and being stressed out because they're not sure about their kid's daycare situation. All these things, we just have to answer the question about what kind of society do we want, and then prioritize our programs as city leaders to support that type of society. And building affordable housing for a range of incomes, I think, is a central aspect of helping secure a brighter society and brighter future for any.
Yeah, I was a teacher, Randy, before I was a commercial real estate professional, and I definitely would have qualified for affordable housing. And I've tried to help a fellow professor try to find a house after I left. And since the affordability has gone down so quickly here in our valley, they're forced to be in an apartment living situation, and they're even on a need for affordable housing at this point. So it's, when you say the 30% number and what the median apartment rents are going for now and what the salaries are here in our area, it's the everyday kind of service worker.
That's it. So you take that, you take what you just said, and then you go to like a resort type environment, and it's exponentially increased there, because typically the populations are smaller and all those things. And, you have people that have the means to take a vacation there, and they kind of like it when they can walk into a coffee shop and actually get a coffee and not wait in line for half an hour, or not get clean towels for 2 days because there's nobody available to wash those towels and fold them and bring them up to you. So we like our services. We like to have a nice, fun experience, but all those people that providing that the background to allow that fun experience to happen, they need to live somewhere, and that somewhere needs to be safe, needs to be as close as possible to where they're working, and it needs to be consistent, constant thing, because people without a secure, consistent home, it's very difficult to try to build on. It's very difficult to go, okay, I'm going to go take some additional training at night school or something, or online to move up the ladder at work, or do whatever, if you're worried that next week you're going to be living somewhere else because the situation's so in block. So you're sharing, one bedroom apartment with 4 other people. And that's all kind of on the edge. I think that, we don't talk about most people don't talk about kind of the psychological impacts of all this instability related to housing. But you think about all the difficulty that every family faces, even if they have a very secure home situation. So you take away that secure home situation and those just core lifestyle successes and happiness and contentment, and fulfillment, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, Randy, we've kind of reached sort of our typical podcast episode length, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface on the subject. I think we need to make sure that the next time you visit this area, that we catch up in person and we can kind of have a follow up. But we really appreciate you taking the time to visit with us today. What's a good way for folks to get in touch with you if they want to ask questions further or try to engage your services in addressing this issue?
Yeah, can I give you my phone number and email address and things like that? Is that something that can be included?
Yeah, absolutely. And we can set it up so that we include your phone number and email address as part of the show notes. So we can just let the listeners know that we'll make sure we include that there. So it sounds like phone and email, best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah. So anyone can reach out to me at any time. My email address and phone number will be made available during the podcast here. And take a look at CushingTerrell.com, and we'll have that listed. So our firm has 13 offices around the United States. We're right there in Boise. We're in Austin. We're in Seattle. We're in Denver and a bunch of other cities all over Montana. Company's been around for over 80 years, almost 500 employees. We've got architects, engineers of every kind, stripe, interior designers. We've got a big network of folks that are very, very interested in making community and helping. And I just would love to be a resource for any of your listeners out there. Absolutely, just get in touch with me, and we'll set up a time. And happy to listen to your circumstances and whatever your specific thoughts are, and we can just brainstorm and see if we can come up with something. So, guys, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. It's been great. I'd be happy to do it again too, in any form, whether it's there in town with you guys, or if you want to do get together again sometime. We'll do another one.
Awesome.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you.